The sun, a mocking orb of pale fire, beat down on the village square, reflecting off the polished obsidian of the ancestral stone. Reyna Corvin stood before it, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the icy tendrils of humiliation coiling in her gut. Whispers sharp as flint shards scoured her ears from the assembly gathered. Barren, cursed, unworthy. Her fiancé, Yorick, a man whose eyes had once held a tender light for her, now averted his gaze, his jaw tight. The village elder, Meister Boren, a figure etched with the weight of tradition and ancient law, raised a gnarled hand. "Reyna Corvin," his voice boomed, amplified by the resonant stone. "You stand accused before the ancestors. 3 seasons have passed since your binding to Yorick. 3 seasons, and the earth of your womb remains fallow. The clan demands issue. The spirits demand continuation, yet you bear no child." A collective sigh of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Reyna's cheeks burned. How could she explain the strange internal heat, the unpredictable surges of energy that sometimes left her breathless, the dreams of soaring wings and molten rock that felt more real than her waking life? How could she confess that the mere thought of Yorick's touch, once comforting, now sometimes ignited a tremor deep within her? A primal urge to recoil, to protect something she couldn't even name. She had tried to conceive, of course, for Yorick, for the village, for the crushing weight of expectation. But each month the moon turned, and her body remained stubbornly, mysteriously barren. It wasn't barrenness, she knew, not truly. It was different. A wildness within her that rejected the quiet rhythms of human life. "Speak, girl," Boren commanded, his eyes piercing. "Do you defy the ancestors? Do you deny the purpose of your blood?" I do not deny my purpose," Reyna stammered, her voice thin and reedy against the vastness of the square. "But there is something within me, a fire." She touched her chest above her racing heart. "It has always been there. It keeps me from what you ask." Laughter, cruel and derisive, erupted from a knot of younger women. Yorick flinched, his loyalty clearly torn between his personal affection and the overwhelming pressure of public condemnation. Meister Boren's face darkened, his lips thinning into a grim line. "A fire, you say?" he sneered. "Or a blight? Your mother, God rest her soul, spoke of a fever when you were but a babe, a strange heat that no healer could quench. We dismissed it then as a child's illness, but now, your unfertility, your strange dreams whispered by your kin, it paints a different canvas." He gestured to 2 burly village guards. "Bring forth the cleansing knife." Reyna's breath hitched. The cleansing knife, not for sacrifice, not for death, but for the ritual of casting out. It was a blade steeped in ancient salt and potent herbs, used to draw blood from those deemed cursed, to bleed out the taint and leave them pure or utterly spent. The procedure was painful, public, and its shame clung to a person for life. As the guards approached, their faces grim but resolute, a wave of defiant heat surged through Reyna's veins. It was a familiar sensation, yet stronger now, humming just beneath her skin. She felt a strange certainty, a deep, resonant wrongness about what they were doing. Her blood wasn't tainted. It was alive. One guard seized her arm, his grip like iron. The other, holding a dull, ceremonial knife, approached her wrist. "For the purification of your lineage, Reyna Corvin," Meister Boren intoned, his voice devoid of pity. "For the future of our clan." As the cold steel touched her skin, a searing pain lanced through Reyna. It wasn't the cut itself, which was shallow, but the sudden, violent rush of her own blood, vibrant and shockingly hot against the frigid metal. A single dark drop welled up, then another, spilling onto the ancient obsidian of the ancestral stone. The moment it touched the stone, everything changed. The ground vibrated. A low, guttural hum, like the awakening of some colossal beast from slumber, resonated through the village square. The obsidian, usually smooth and inert, began to glow with an internal, molten light. Not the pale sunlight, but a deep, fiery orange that pulsated, mimicking a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. Gasps of terror erupted from the crowd. The guards recoiled, their faces pale, dropping the cleansing knife with a clatter. Meister Boren, who had stood unyielding moments before, now stumbled backward, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible realization. Where Reyna's blood had met the stone, Intricate, glowing sigils began to materialize. They weren't etched onto the surface, but seemed to ignite within the obsidian itself, patterns of swirling flame, jagged mountains, and soaring, winged beasts. They pulsed, drawing in the light, then flaring outwards, bathing the square in an infernal glow. The air grew heavy, charged with an ancient, forgotten power. A metallic scent, like ozone mixed with burning embers, filled her nostrils. Reyna stared, mesmerized and terrified. The strange warmth within her had erupted, not painfully, but with an exhilarating, terrifying power. It wasn't just heat anymore. It was a vibrant, thrumming energy, making her skin tingle, her hair feel alive, as if each strand were reaching for the light. Her cut wrist, forgotten, burned with a fierce joy. Suddenly, a fissure snaked across the ancestral stone, a crack of incandescent light that shot through the glowing sigils. The humming intensified, rising to a deafening roar. The earth beneath their feet bucked violently. Villagers screamed, scattering in all directions, their fear a palpable wave that washed over Reyna. Jorik, his face a mask of horror, vanished into the terrified throng. Meister Boren, however, remained rooted, his gaze fixed on Reyna, then on the blazing signs of the stone. "The dragon war sigils," he shrieked, his voice thin with terror. "By the ancestors, the blood! It wakes them! She carries the blood of the serpent lords." The words, whispered in hushed tones through generations, now hung in the air. A chilling prophecy made manifest. The serpent lords, ancient, monstrous creatures of fire and shadow, legends from a time before human memory. A deafening crack split the air. The ancestral stone exploded outwards in a shower of glowing obsidian shards, sending waves of raw, ancient energy reverberating through the square. Reyna was thrown backward, landing hard on the dust-choked ground. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, but even as she struggled for breath, she felt an unsettling connection to the storm of power now unleashed. It was terrifying, yes, but also familiar. From the swirling dust and light, a monstrous roar ripped through the air, shaking the very foundations of the village. It was a sound that belonged to the wild, to mountains and skies, to the primordial essence of the world. And it was getting closer. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through Reyna's awe. The village was in chaos. Homes were crumbling, dust plumes rose, and the sky, once a soft blue, now swirled with ominous dark clouds. She heard frantic shouts of hunters, dragonkin, and the sickening clang of steel against something unyielding. Scrambling to her feet, Reyna realized she was still dangerously close to the shattered remnants of the ancestral stone, which continued to pulse with a fading, but still potent light. She had to flee. But where? Her home, her village, her life, all were dissolving into a nightmare of fire and fear. She stumbled through the terrified throngs, deaf to their cries, blind to their faces. All she registered was the overwhelming instinct to survive, to escape the radiating power that she herself had unleashed. The hum beneath her skin was now a frantic rhythm, a primal drumbeat demanding action. As she reached the outskirts of the village, near the shadowed tree line that led to the winding mountain passes, she saw them, figures clad in dark scaled leather armor, moving with a chilling precision. They were not human villagers, nor were they the monstrous serpent lords of legend. These were the Iron Scale Order, the dragon hunters, feared throughout the scattered human settlements and whispered about even in the remote dragon territories. Their leader, a tall, imposing man with a grim, scarred face and eyes like polished obsidian, stood at the vanguard. His hand rested on the hilt of a massive sword, its blade gleaming with an unnatural, cold light. Reyna recognized the metal, dragon-forged steel, imbued with enchantments to pierce even the thickest scales. He scanned the chaos, his gaze razor-sharp, cutting through the panicked villagers as if they were mere obstacles. Then his eyes locked onto Reyna. A cold dread seized her. There was a terrible recognition in his gaze, a predatory glint that chilled her to the bone. He knew what her blood had done. He was here for her. "The girl," his voice rang out, a sharp, commanding bark that cut through the cacophony. "Seize the girl with the marked blood. She is the key." Hunters, moving with unnerving speed, detached from the main force and began to converge on her. Reyna bolted, a raw, animalistic fear propelling her forward. She plunged into the dense woods, branches tearing at her clothes, thorns scratching her skin. The forest, usually a place of quiet solace, was now a labyrinth of shadows and unseen dangers. Behind her, she heard the heavy thud of their boots, the rustle of leaves, the metallic chime of their armor. They were gaining. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached, but the strange fire within her refused to let her yield. It pulsed, urging her on, a desperate, wild rhythm. Just as a hunter's hand brushed her shoulder, a shadow, vast and impossibly swift, descended from the sky. It wasn't the dark, churning storm clouds that had gathered, but something far more solid, more powerful. A gust of wind, smelling of ash and ancient stone, slammed into Reyna, throwing her off balance. A guttural roar, deeper and more profound than any she had heard before, ripped through the air, directly above her. It was a sound of immense power, of fury, and something else. A warning. The hunters froze. Reyna, flattened against the earth, dared to look up. Above her, silhouetted against the swirling, angry sky, was a creature of myth made real. A dragon. Not the monstrous, chaotic serpent lords of Boren's terrified shouts, but a being of formidable, terrifying grace. Its scales were the color of twilight obsidian, reflecting the chaotic light of the unfolding disaster. Its wings, vast and leathery, spread wide, momentarily blotting out the sky. Its head, crowned with sharp jutting horns, turned, and two eyes, like molten gold, fixed on the leader of the Iron Scale Order. Then, to her astonishment, those golden eyes briefly flickered down, meeting Reyna's terrified gaze. There was no immediate malice, no predatory hunger, only a profound, unsettling intensity. A flicker of something ancient and knowing, as if it had been waiting for this moment. For her. Before the hunters could react, the dragon moved. It wasn't an attack of fire, not yet. It was a calculated, devastating physical assault. Its massive tail swept through the trees with the force of a battering ram, sending hunters flying, their armor crumpling like tin. Its claws, each as long as Reyna's arm, raked the earth, tearing gashes into the ground, creating a protective barrier between Reyna and her pursuers. The leader of the Iron Scale Order, however, was no ordinary hunter. He stood his ground, his great sword drawn, its cold light cutting through the shadows. "Theros Vare," he roared, his voice laced with venom. "You defy the Council's decree, still meddling where you do not belong, and now sheltering a human abomination?" The dragon landed, its impact shaking the ground, its vast form creating an impenetrable wall. The molten gold eyes narrowed, and a low growl rumbled deep in its chest, a sound that resonated through Reyna's very bones. "I defy no just decree, Corvin," the dragon's voice boomed, deep and resonant, somehow cutting through the roar of the wind and the clamor of battle. It wasn't the guttural, mindless roar she expected, but a voice of chilling intelligence, ancient and powerful. "I protect what is mine to protect." And with a sickening, dizzying shimmer of air, the colossal dragon began to shift. Scales melted into skin, massive wings retracted into broad shoulders, the draconic head streamlined into a human form. In moments, where a terrifying dragon had stood, now stood a man. He was tall, powerfully built, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscled frame. His skin was tanned, rugged, hinting at a life exposed to elements, and his black hair, thick and untamed, fell past his shoulders. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Still molten gold, but now framed by human lids, they blazed with an intensity that promised both immense power and a profound, solitary weariness. Scars, thin and white, marred his jawline and brow, testaments to past battles, adding to his formidable presence. This was Lord Theros Vare, the exiled dragon lord, a name whispered in fearful awe even in the deepest human villages. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the scattered hunters, then settling, finally, on Reyna. Her heart hammered, not just from fear, but from an undeniable primal recognition. His presence, even in human form, stirred the deep, burning warmth within her, making it hum with an eager, almost joyous resonance. It was as if her very blood was singing to his. "This is not your fight, Corvin," Theros said, his voice now lower, but still carrying the weight of command. "Step aside." Corvin, the hunter leader, merely laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The council stripped you of your lands, Theros, exiled you to this mountain waste. You have no authority, And that human girl, her blood wakes the old gods. She is a threat to both our worlds. The Iron-Scale Order will cleanse her. Theros's golden eyes flicked to Reyna again, then back to Corvin. A dangerous stillness settled over him. Her blood is her own, and her fate, for now, is intertwined with mine. He paused, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his gaze. She is under my protection. Protection, Corvin scoffed, gesturing around them at the burning village. You mean possession? What strange magic has this human woven around your exile's heart, Theros? Does the blood of the Serpent Lords call to your cursed lineage? The accusation struck a nerve. Theros's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. The air around him shimmered, and Reyna felt a sudden, oppressive heat emanating from him, a surge of raw, barely contained power. She instinctively took a step back, yet found herself strangely drawn, like a moth to a dangerous, beautiful flame. Silence, Hunter, Theros growled, his voice a low rumble, laced with lethal warning. Or I will silence you permanently. Corvin, despite the obvious danger, held his ground, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. The Dragon War will begin anew, Theros, and this human girl, with her tainted blood, will be its harbinger. We will take her, even if we must cut her from your very hide. With a battle cry, Corvin lunged, his great sword slashing towards Theros. But the Dragon Lord was faster. He moved with a breathtaking speed and grace, his body a blur of motion. His hand met Corvin's sword arm with a crack that echoed through the trees. The hunter cried out, his weapon clattering to the ground. Theros twisted, his elbow catching Corvin in the gut, driving the air from his lungs. Then with a powerful shove, he sent the hunter leader sprawling. Retreat! Corvin choked out to his remaining men, struggling for breath. The girl, she will be ours. The hunters, seeing their leader defeated, hesitated for a moment, then began to fall back, melting into the shadows of the forest, carrying their injured. Their retreat was swift, organized, hinting at a larger force, a persistent threat. Theros watched them go, his molten gaze tracking their movements until the last rustle of leaves faded into silence. The oppressive heat around him slowly receded, though the air still crackled with latent power. He turned to Reyna, his golden eyes, once again, meeting hers. She was still on the ground, bruised and shaken, but her gaze was unwavering. There was fear, yes, but also a growing sense of wonder, a spark of recognition in her dark eyes that mirrored the strange, primal resonance within him. You are safe now, human, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, yet still carrying the deep timbre of his dragon form. He extended a large, calloused hand to her. Come, my stronghold is not far. It is not wise to linger here. Reyna stared at his hand. It was scarred, powerful, but it offered protection. Her heart still pounded, a frantic rhythm that felt strangely in sync with the fading pulse of power from the shattered ancestral stone. The world had turned upside down. Her simple life, her quiet village, her hidden secret, all had been obliterated in a single terrifying instant. But as she looked into Theros's golden eyes, a strange sense of destiny settled over her. The fire within her, once a shameful burden, now seemed to leap in response to his presence, a wild, untamed thing finally finding its echo. She took his hand. His touch was warm, surprisingly gentle, yet infused with an electric energy that sent a shiver through her. It was the touch of fire, of molten stone, of ancient power, and in that touch, she felt not fear, but a profound, terrifying sense of coming home. As he pulled her to her feet, the last tendrils of twilight wrapped around them, obscuring the smoking ruins of her village, embracing them both in the deepening shadows of the mountain. Far above, the true storm clouds gathered, pregnant with untold power, mirroring the tempest that had just begun within Reyna's awakened blood, and the dragon who had claimed her. The mountain path wound upwards, a treacherous ribbon of loose stone and gnarled roots, swallowed by the encroaching twilight. Reyna followed Theros Vare, her hand still tingling from his touch, the warmth in her veins thrumming an erratic beat. The air grew colder, thinner, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the acrid smoke still rising from her burning village below. Theros moved with a silent, fluid grace, his powerful frame seeming to melt into the gathering shadows. He wore simple, dark leather breeches and a tunic. But even in such unassuming attire, an aura of raw power clung to him, a wild, untamed essence that hummed just beneath his human skin. Reyna kept her gaze fixed on his broad back, a strange mixture of terror and fierce curiosity churning within her. This man, this dragon, had just saved her, yet he was also the harbinger of a chaos she barely understood. "We are nearing the ascent to my stronghold," Tharos's voice rumbled, deep and low, cutting through the silence. He didn't turn, but the words seemed to wrap around her, acknowledging her presence, her fear, perhaps even the burgeoning connection that pulsed between them. "It is a hidden place, known only to a few, and none I trust." Reyna swallowed, her throat dry. "Your stronghold?" she managed, her voice hoarse. "You live alone?" He paused then, stopping at a narrow ledge overlooking a dizzying drop. He turned, and in the fading light, his molten gold eyes pierced hers. "Alone," he affirmed, the single word carrying the weight of centuries of solitude. "Exile is a lonely path, human, especially for one whose clan has cast him out for refusing to bend to their archaic will." "The hunter, Corvin, he spoke of decrees," Reyna ventured, pushing past her apprehension. "And your clan. Why were you exiled?" A shadow flickered across Tharos's face, deepening the lines of his scars. "The Dragon Council," he began, his voice laced with a weary disdain, "believes that true power lies in rigid adherence to tradition, in isolation from the human world. They feared pagkag, mixing. They feared the whispers of the ancients, of the blood of the serpent lords. My father, Lord Kaelin Vare, believed otherwise. He saw common ground, a shared destiny with certain human lines. He sought to forge alliances, not war." Reyna's heart gave a lurch. Blood of the serpent lords, that phrase again. Meister Boren's terrified shriek. And now Tharos, whose own father had seemingly embraced such a dangerous concept. "What happened to your father?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The question felt intrusive, but an undeniable urge to understand this man, this world she'd been violently thrust into, propelled her. Tharos's gaze hardened, drifting towards the distant horizon where the last vestiges of sunset bled into bruised purples and ominous grays. "He was betrayed," he said, the word a raw wound, "by those within his own council, who saw his openness as weakness. They orchestrated his downfall, framed him for a forbidden summoning. He died defending his ideals, defending his belief in a different path. And I refused to denounce him, refused to deny his vision. For that I was stripped of my title, exiled from the Vare lands, cast to these desolate peaks." He turned back to her, his golden eyes burning with a controlled intensity. "My clan now bows to the Stormwing clan, to the north, a harsh, aggressive lineage who believe humans are nothing more than cattle or prey. They would have you burned as a witch, Reyna Corvin, or worse, used as a weapon in their endless thirst for power." Reyna shivered, a cold dread seeping into her bones that had nothing to do with the mountain air. She was a pawn, a dangerous catalyst, hunted by both human fanatics and vengeful dragons. "The sigils, on the stone," she began, the memory still vivid, terrifying. "What did it do?" Tharos sighed, a sound like shifting stone. "The ancestral stone of your village. It was not merely a ceremonial monument, Reyna. It was a fragment of the first seal, one of 7 ancient binding points that kept the power of the Serpent Lords dormant after the Great Dragon War. Your human ancestors, in their fear and their wisdom, bound the deepest, most chaotic draconic energies into the very earth itself. But they did not understand the nature of all bloodlines." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. The proximity of him, the sheer physical power emanating from his form, made her pulse quicken. "Your blood, Reyna Corvin, carries the echo of that ancient power, a dormant strain of the Serpent Lord lineage, diluted by generations of human blood, yet still potent enough to resonate with the seals. When your blood met the stone, it did not just mark you. It awakened the first shard of that forgotten power. It acted as a key." "A key?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "A key that every faction now seeks," Tharos confirmed, his gaze grim. "The Iron Scale Order, who believe your power must be purged. The Stormwing, who would exploit it for conquest, and others who seek to restore the Serpent Lords themselves, believing their return will bring a new age of draconic supremacy. Reyna felt a sudden, profound nausea. She wasn't just a girl with a secret warmth anymore. She was a living artifact, a weapon, a prize in a cosmic struggle. Her simple life was gone, replaced by a terrifying, dangerous destiny. "What do I do?" she asked, the words raw with desperation. "I don't understand any of this. I don't know how to control whatever this is." She gestured vaguely at her chest, at the thrumming fire within. Theros studied her, his golden eyes unblinking. "You come with me," he stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "To my stronghold. There you will be safe for now. And there, perhaps, we can begin to understand the gift, or curse, that flows in your veins." He turned and began to ascend again, his form blurring into the deepening gloom. Reyna followed, her legs heavy, her mind reeling. Safety, a place of understanding. The words were a balm to her shattered nerves, even as the cold, hard reality of her situation pressed in. She was bound to this exiled dragon, her fate irrevocably entwined with his. The path grew steeper, turning into a precarious scramble up a sheer rock face. Theros moved with ease, his large hands finding purchase in impossible crevices. Reyna, less accustomed to such terrain, struggled. A loose stone shifted beneath her foot, sending a spray of pebbles clattering down the abyss. She gasped, her heart leaping into her throat as she lost her footing. Before she could fall, Theros was there, his hand, strong and warm, closed around her forearm, steadying her. His touch sent a jolt through her, a familiar electric spark that both startled and comforted her. She looked up, her breath catching. His golden eyes, so close, held a flicker of concern, a rare glimpse beneath his stoic exterior. "Careful," he murmured, his voice a low thrum against the roar of the wind. "The mountain demands respect." He didn't release her hand, but kept a firm, reassuring grip as they continued their ascent. The simple contact, the unspoken support, grounded her amidst the dizzying heights and the overwhelming strangeness of her new reality. Finally, they reached a narrow plateau, concealed behind a jutting rock formation. Here, a massive, ancient oak, its branches twisted like gnarled bone, stood sentinel before a colossal rock face. And within that rock face, a shadowed opening barely visible in the dark, the entrance to Theros' stronghold. As they approached, a low melodic chime echoed from within the rock. Theros released Reyna's hand and stepped forward, placing his palm against a smooth, dark section of stone beside the entrance. A faint, intricate pattern, almost invisible, glowed for a moment beneath his touch, then faded. With a low rumble, the stone door, perfectly disguised, began to slide open, revealing a tunnel of absolute darkness. "Welcome to my sanctuary, Reyna Corvin," Theros said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "It is not grand, but it is secure." He led her inside, and the heavy stone door slid shut behind them with a resounding thud, plunging them into oppressive darkness. Reyna gasped, a sudden claustrophobia seizing her. Then a soft, ethereal light bloomed around Theros. Not a flame, but a pale, luminous glow that emanated from his very skin, outlining the powerful contours of his form. It pulsed gently, illuminating the rough-hewn tunnel around them. "An innate gift of my lineage," he explained, seeing her wide-eyed gaze. "A minor convenience in the dark." The light intensified slightly, revealing that the walls of the tunnel were not merely rock, but embedded with faint, shimmering veins of what looked like solidified, glowing crystal. They pulsed, echoing Theros' own internal light, creating an otherworldly pathway. They walked deeper, the air growing warmer, the scent of damp earth replaced by something else, a faint metallic tang mixed with the clean, sharp aroma of ancient stone. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. Here, the glowing crystals were more abundant, weaving intricate patterns across the walls and ceiling, casting the space in an ethereal, shifting light. It was a place of stark, formidable beauty, a natural fortress carved by eons of wind and fire. In the center of the cavern stood a large, rough-hewn stone table, surrounded by benches. Against one wall, a simple bed with furs, and against another a collection of weapons. Swords, axes, and a magnificent bow hung alongside various tools and parchments. It was a Spartan existence, but one clearly suited to a warrior and a scholar. "I imagine this is a far cry from your village home," Theros said, gesturing vaguely around the cavern. He sounded almost apologetic. Reyna simply shook her head, still awestruck by the sheer scale and ancient power of the place. "It's incredible," she breathed, reaching out a tentative hand to touch one of the glowing crystal veins. It was cool beneath her fingers, yet pulsed with a gentle warmth. "These crystals are attuned to the Earth's energy," Theros explained, observing her, "and to draconic presence. They glow brighter when a dragon is near, or when strong energies stir within these mountains." He paused, his golden eyes fixed on her. "They have been glowing quite fiercely since you arrived." Reyna felt a blush creep up her neck. The internal fire, the blood of the serpent lords pulsed in response, making her fingertips tingle. I feel it too," she admitted, dropping her hand. "A connection, to the stone, to this place." Theros nodded slowly, a thoughtful, almost solemn expression on his face. "The old legends speak of such a bond, a resonance between those of the serpent bloodline and the very core of the earth. But this is different, more immediate, more powerful." He walked towards the large stone table, picking up a scroll of ancient, brittle parchment. "My father dedicated his life to studying these old texts, searching for answers. He believed that the Dragon War was not truly a conflict of good versus evil, but a devastating misunderstanding fueled by fear of this very power." He unrolled the scroll, revealing intricate diagrams and flowing script in a language Reyna didn't recognize, yet felt strangely drawn to. "He spoke of a prophecy," Theros continued, his voice lowering, "of a human, a wingless one, whose blood would one day awaken the dormant fire, and whose heart would choose between consuming power and binding the worlds together." Reyna's breath hitched. Wingless one, that was her. The prophecy, spoken by a dragon lord who had died for his beliefs, now echoing in this hidden stronghold. "He also spoke of the soul flame," Theros added, his voice almost a whisper, his gaze distant, as if reliving ancient memories. "A bond beyond understanding, beyond control. A dragon and a human, linked by a shared spark. A primal energy that could either unite them forever or tear them both apart." He looked at her then, his golden eyes piercing, raw with a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "My father found no such mate. He sought knowledge, but never that kind of bond." Reyna's own internal fire leaped, a frantic, joyous response to his words. Soul flame. The phrase resonated deep within her, igniting a fervent, almost desperate hope. Was this what she felt? This terrifying, exhilarating connection? "Lord Theros," a new voice broke the heavy silence, crisp and intelligent, yet tinged with an underlying tremor of awe. Reyna spun around, startled. A figure emerged from a shadowed alcove she hadn't noticed. A man of slender build, with spectacles perched on his nose and a stack of ancient scrolls tucked under one arm. He wore simple scholar's robes, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, gleamed with excitement and a touch of fear. "I felt the tremor," the scholar continued, adjusting his spectacles. "A significant tremor, my lord. The first seal, it shattered, and then a surge of power unlike anything I have ever documented. The crystals, they are alive." He gestured around the cavern, his eyes alight. "It must be the wingless one. The prophecy is unfolding." Theros nodded, a hint of resignation in his expression. "Indeed, Verith, this is Reyna Corvin, the human who carries dragon blood." He gestured to Reyna. "Reyna, this is Verith, my companion in exile, and a scholar of ancient lore. He has been deciphering my father's research for decades." Verith bowed respectfully, his gaze, though curious, held none of the fear or disgust Reyna had grown accustomed to. Instead, there was a profound sense of awe. "A true honor, Lady Corvin. I have dreamt of this day, to witness the awakening of the serpent blood. It is beyond my wildest imaginings." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her with an almost scientific intensity. The surge of power, it was incredible, pure, raw. "Tell me, do you feel any changes?" A heightened sense of hearing? A taste of ash on your tongue? Perhaps the subtle shift in air currents? Reyna blinked, overwhelmed by his sudden torrent of questions. I just feel warm, she admitted, slightly embarrassed. And connected. To the stone, to the ground, and to Lord Theros. She cast a quick, hesitant glance at the Dragon Lord. Vareth's eyes widened, and he turned to Theros, a triumphant, almost manic grin spreading across his face. Connected to the Dragon Lord. By the ancients, it is as the texts foretold. The resonance. The awakening is not merely of the blood, but of the bond. He began to pace excitedly, mumbling to himself. This changes everything. The Serpent Lords did not just wield power, they were power, intertwined with their chosen mates. The soul flame, it is real. Theros watched the scholar with a weary amusement, then turned back to Reyna, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through his powerful frame. Vareth is enthusiastic, he explained, though his golden eyes held a depth of emotion that betrayed his calm demeanor. He believes my father's prophecies hold the key to preventing another dragon war, not starting one. The prophecies speak of the choice, Vareth interjected, still pacing. The wingless one's choice, to embrace the power and become a beacon of hope, or to succumb to its wild nature and shatter the realm. He stopped abruptly, looking at Reyna with an earnest, almost desperate plea in his eyes. We must guide you, Lady Corvin. We must understand the nature of your blood and of the bond you share with Lord Theros, for the fate of our worlds depends on it. Reyna felt a dizzying wave wash over her. Guide her. Understand the bond. It was too much. Her head began to throb. The sheer weight of their expectations, of the prophecy, of the ancient war that suddenly rested on her shoulders, threatened to crush her. She looked at Theros, a silent plea in her eyes. He met her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, she saw not just the powerful Dragon Lord, but a glimpse of the lonely exile, the man burdened by his own past, his own prophecy. And in his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own confusion, her own fear, and something else, a spark of the dangerous, undeniable connection that bound them. For now, Theros commanded, his voice firm, drawing Vareth from his excited rambling. Reyna needs rest, and a meal. We will speak more of prophecies and soul flames tomorrow. He turned to Reyna, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. You are safe here, Reyna Corvin. No hunter, no rival clan will breach these walls while I still draw breath. This I swear. His words were a powerful anchor in the swirling chaos of her mind. She nodded, feeling a profound exhaustion finally settle upon her. The fire within her, though still present, seemed to quiet, as if acknowledging the sanctuary, the temporary respite. As Theros led her towards the simple bed, a profound thought struck Reyna. She had lost everything, her home, her past, her identity. But in its place, she had found an exiled dragon lord, a zealous scholar, a hidden stronghold, and a terrifying, exhilarating power humming in her veins. Her blood had awoken ancient magic, and in doing so, had bound her to a destiny far grander and far more perilous than she could ever have imagined. And as she lay down, the glowing crystals above casting an otherworldly light, she felt the steady thrum of Theros' presence in the cavern, a silent promise against the overwhelming night. The echoes of his father's prophecy and the whispers of a soul flame swirled around her, pulling her deeper into a world where human hearts and dragon fire were never meant to mix, yet now burned with a dangerous, undeniable intensity. The cavern was steeped in a silence so profound that Reyna could hear the rhythmic drip of water somewhere deep within the mountain's heart. She awoke to the pale, ethereal glow of the crystal veins, a light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Her body ached, a testament to the night's harrowing escape, but the exhaustion that had claimed her earlier had receded, replaced by a restless energy. The fire within her, while no longer frantic, still hummed, a persistent low thrum against her bones, a constant reminder of the blood she carried. She sat up on the furs, her eyes scanning the cavern. Theros was not there. Vareth was nowhere in sight either. A sudden pang of vulnerability struck her. This stronghold, so formidable, so safe, was also a prison, albeit a gilded one. And she was utterly alone in it, save for the echoes of ancient power. Rising, Reyna explored the cavern. Near the entrance, a small, cleverly crafted hearth held the remnants of a fire, its embers still glowing faintly. Above it, a pot hung, releasing a savory, earthy aroma. Hunger, a dull ache in her stomach, suddenly sharpened. She found a bowl and spoon nearby and helped herself to the stew, its warmth a welcome comfort against the lingering chill of the mountain air. It was a simple, hearty meal, and as she ate, a measure of strength returned to her. She noticed a small, narrow passage leading off from the main cavern, easily missed in the dim light. Curiosity, a powerful force in her new, bewildering existence, tugged at her. Setting down the bowl, Reyna ventured cautiously into the passage. It sloped gently downwards, the glowing crystals here more concentrated, casting a brighter, more vibrant light. The air grew warmer, infused with the scent of sulfur and something else, something primal and alive. The passage opened into another, smaller cavern, this one dominated by a pool of shimmering dark water. Steam rose from its surface, curling like wisps of mist, hinting at the heat beneath. The walls were rough-hewn, natural rock, but here, the crystal veins pulsed with an almost frantic energy, casting dancing patterns of light across the cavern. This was clearly a geothermal spring, a source of natural heat and power. And in the center of the pool, submerged to his chest, was Theros. Reyna froze, her breath catching in her throat. His back was to her, broad and powerfully muscled, slick with water. His black hair, wet and unbound, streamed down his back, clinging to his skin. Scars more numerous and intricate than she had realized crisscrossed his back and shoulders, silent testament to a lifetime of battle. The pale glow of the crystals illuminated the rippling muscles of his back and shoulders, making him look less like a man and more like a creature forged from molten rock and shadow. He shifted, his head turning, and his molten gold eyes met hers. There was no surprise in them, no anger, only a quiet acceptance, a depth of ancient knowing that seemed to see straight into her soul. Reyna felt a profound flush creep up her neck. She should leave, turn around, give him his privacy. Yet she remained rooted to the spot, unable to avert her gaze from the sheer, raw power of his presence. The warmth in her own blood pulsed, an urgent, almost desperate yearning. It was a call and response, a silent symphony between the fire within her and the primal heat of his draconic essence. "You are awake," Theros stated, his voice a low rumble that resonated in the small cavern, yet held no harshness. Yes," Reyna stammered, feeling utterly foolish. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just exploring." A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched the corner of his lips, a ghost of a smile. "This place is not so large that intrusion is possible, human. Its secrets are few, and now they are yours as well, should you choose to accept them." He rose slowly from the pool, the water sheeting off his powerful form, glistening in the crystal light. Reyna's gaze involuntarily tracked his movement. His body was a masterpiece of strength and grace, a living testament to his draconic heritage. She felt a heat rise within her, a blush of both embarrassment and a thrilling, dangerous awareness. She quickly averted her eyes, focusing instead on the steam rising from the pool. Theros moved towards a stack of clean, rough-spun linens near the edge of the pool. As he dried himself, she forced herself to breathe, to quell the erratic beat of her heart. "You need not be ashamed, Reyna Corvin." His voice, closer now, broke the silence. "Your senses are heightened. Your blood calls to my presence. It is the nature of what has awakened." Reyna looked up, startled by his understanding. He was right. It wasn't just a simple attraction. It was a deeper, more primal pull, a recognition of something kindred and powerful. "My blood. It feels wild," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "And terrifying. Like it has a will of its own." Theros paused in the act of pulling on a clean tunic. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a shared knowing. "It does," he affirmed, his voice low. "The Serpent Lords were beings of raw, elemental power. Their blood remembers. It desires to be unleashed, to soar, to burn." He approached her, his steps silent. "That is the choice Vareth spoke of. To learn to master that wildness, or to be consumed by it." He gestured to the pool. The waters here are drawn from the deepest veins of the mountain, warmed by the heart of the earth. They carry the ancient magic. It can soothe the restless spirit, and for those whose blood resonates, it can aid in controlling the internal fire. Reyna looked at the steaming pool, then back at Theros. He was offering her not just refuge, but a path to understanding, to mastery. Will it help me? It will help you find stillness, he replied. A temporary respite from the clamor within. The true work, however, is in here. He tapped his temple, then laid a hand over his own heart. And here, it is a journey of spirit, not merely of body. He gestured towards the bath. I will leave you to it. Vareth will join us shortly for the midday meal. As he turned to leave, Reyna reached out, a sudden, inexplicable urge overriding her shyness. Theros, she called, her voice soft. He paused, turning back. His molten gaze met hers, patiently waiting. Thank you, she said, the words heartfelt. For everything. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her gratitude, then moved to the passage and disappeared. Reyna stood for a long moment, the warmth of the cavern, the scent of sulfur, and the echoes of Theros' presence surrounding her. Slowly, she shed her tattered clothes, her movements hesitant, then more resolute. Stepping into the shimmering pool, she gasped as the heat enveloped her. It was intensely warm, yet incredibly soothing, washing away the tension in her muscles, calming the agitated thrum of her blood. She submerged herself fully, feeling the ancient magic of the mountain seep into her skin, into her very bones. For the first time since her blood had spilled on the ancestral stone, Reyna felt a flicker of peace. Later, refreshed and clad in a simple tunic Theros had left for her, Reyna joined him and Vareth at the stone table in the main cavern. Vareth, his spectacles gleaming, had several scrolls spread out before him, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ah, Lady Corvin, feeling more grounded? Vareth asked, looking up as she approached. I've been poring over the elder texts. My Lord Theros believes your awakening is a direct fulfillment of the winged heart prophecy, a fragment his father sought so tirelessly. Theros, seated opposite Vareth, merely observed Reyna, his golden eyes unreadable. The winged heart prophecy? Reyna echoed, pulling up a stone bench. Yes, Vareth exclaimed, tapping a brittle piece of parchment. It speaks of a human, a wingless one, born with the latent blood of the Serpent Lords, whose awakening would coincide with the shattering of the first seal. Her heart, pure yet potent, would resonate with the soul flame of a dragon lord, and together they would face a choice, to unleash the primordial chaos or to forge a new path of balance. He looked from Reyna to Theros, his eyes alight with intellectual fervor. The text specifically mentions a binding that transcends lineage, a destiny woven not by birthright, but by mutual awakening. Reyna's gaze drifted to Theros. He met her eyes, a strange, intense vulnerability in his golden depths. The mention of soul flame and binding created an undeniable resonance between them, a silent acknowledgement of the powerful, unsettling connection that hummed in the air. My father believed, Theros began, his voice low, that the Serpent Lords, for all their power, were ultimately beings of pure, untamed chaos. They knew no balance, only consumption. The Dragon War, he argued, was not merely a conflict, but a desperate attempt by the nascent dragon clans and certain human factions to contain that chaos, to bind it before it consumed all. And your blood, Lady Corvin, Vareth added, leaning forward, is a direct conduit to that primordial power. It is both the key and the cage, if left unchecked. Unchecked? Reyna asked, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. The prophecy mentions a cost, Theros said, his voice grave. For the Dragon Lord, who binds with the wingless one, a draining of their own fire, a shared burden. And for the human, a potential for their emotions to become volatile, their very being infused with the raw, untamed essence of the Serpent Lords. It could consume your humanity, Reyna, turn you into something else. Reyna felt a cold dread seize her. The fire within her, once a thrilling rush, now felt like a dangerous, unpredictable beast. What does that mean? Consume my humanity? The Serpent Lords were not merely powerful, Vareth explained, his voice hushed. They were driven by instinct. by raw emotion, by a terrifying purity of destructive intent. Rage, despair, hunger, these would become amplified, overwhelming. Your human heart, your capacity for empathy, for nuanced thought, for love. It could be eroded, replaced by the primal urges of the awakened blood. Reyna looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. This was more terrifying than any hunter. The thought of losing herself, of becoming a creature of pure destructive instinct, chilled her to the bone. My father sought to understand this, Theros interjected, sensing her fear. He believed that the bond itself, the soul flame, could be the tempering force, that through mutual strength, the human could retain her heart, and the dragon could find a new path, a new balance of power. But the bond is dangerous, Vareth quickly added, his brow furrowed. It draws from both. A dragon lord's fire, a wingless one's blood. If one falters, the other could be shattered. It is why the council so vehemently forbids such pairings. A sudden sharp clang echoed from somewhere deep within the mountain. All three stiffened. Theros's golden eyes narrowed, his posture instantly alert. What was that? Reyna whispered, her heart leaping. A breach, Theros stated, his voice a low growl. He rose swiftly, moving towards his weapons rack. His hand closed around the hilt of a magnificent ancient sword, its pommel shaped like a coiled dragon. And too soon for them to have tracked us this deep. A betrayal, Vareth breathed, his face pale. Someone from within, or from the outer passes, but who could know of this place? Theros did not answer. He drew his sword, its blade gleaming with a cold, deadly light. Stay here, Reyna. Vareth, guard her with your life. His molten gaze swept over her, a silent command, a primal warning. This place is secured by ancient wards. For someone to penetrate them, they would need intimate knowledge of my defenses, and a deep-seated desire for my downfall. He turned, his powerful form already shifting slightly, his shoulders broadening, his eyes flaring with an inner light. The air around him began to shimmer with a dangerous heat. With a final grim nod to Vareth, Theros strode towards the passage that led deeper into the mountain, towards the source of the metallic clang. His figure, already formidable, seemed to grow in stature, morphing into the shadow of his true, terrifying form, ready to defend his sanctuary, and the human whose blood now echoed his own. Reyna was left with Vareth, the scholar's face a mask of worry, and the terrifying knowledge that even in this hidden stronghold, the dangers of her awakened blood and the perilous bond it forged were inescapable. The mountain, once a sanctuary, was now a battleground, and the prophecy, once a distant legend, was closing in. The metallic clang echoed again, closer this time, followed by a grunt of effort and a shower of sparks that illuminated the dark passage for a fleeting moment. Reyna's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, oppressive silence that Theros' departure had left. Vareth, his face pale beneath his spectacles, clutched a heavy, leather-bound tome like a shield, his gaze darting nervously towards the passage. Who could it be? Reyna whispered, her voice barely audible. The sense of violation of their sanctuary breached was profound. Vareth swallowed, his eyes wide. The wards, they are ancient, Lady Corvin. Only one with intimate knowledge of Lord Theros' personal sigils could bypass them. Someone who has studied his lineage, his methods, or someone who carries a key to the mountain's deeper pathways. He wrung his hands, his scholar's mind clearly struggling to reconcile the intellectual threat with the immediate, visceral danger. A traitor, it must be. The air in the cavern crackled with an unseen tension, a prelude to the storm that was surely brewing within the mountain's depths. Reyna could feel the distant rumble of Theros' power, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very stone beneath her feet. It was a primal thrum, a battle song, growing steadily in intensity. Suddenly, a choked cry pierced the silence, followed by the sickening thud of a body, then Theros' voice, a low, dangerous growl, barely decipherable. You always were a fool, Olien, driven by envy. Olien, the name struck Reyna with a jolt. She'd heard it before, whispered in fragments of Theros' tragic past. A rival, a distant cousin, always lurking in the periphery of his father's court. A jealous rival, Vareth had once hinted, bitter about Theros' inherent power and his father's favor. The fight raged, unseen, in the winding passages. Sounds of struggle, the scrape of metal, the roar of shifting stone reverberated through the cavern. Reyna instinctively moved closer to the entrance of the passage, her blood thrumming with an uneasy mix of fear and a strange, almost frantic eagerness. The fire within her surged, demanding to be part of the struggle, to know what was happening. Vareth, seeing her movement, reached out, his hand shaking slightly. "Lady Corvin, no, Lord Theros commanded us to stay hidden. The corridors are perilous, filled with traps he set for intruders." But Reyna barely heard him. The pull was too strong. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a profound instinctual call from the core of her being, a response to Theros' battling presence. Her awakened blood sensed his fire, his danger, and yearned to be near it. Ignoring Vareth's frantic pleas, Reyna crept into the passage, her eyes straining to pierce the gloom. The glowing crystal veins here pulsed erratically, casting grotesque dancing shadows that made the walls seem to writhe. She pressed herself against the cold stone, moving cautiously, following the sounds of the struggle. The passage opened into a wider chamber, a natural antechamber before a deeper, spiraling tunnel. Here, the battle was in full fury. Theros, no longer merely a man, but a being on the precipice of his draconic form, was locked in combat with a figure of similar stature. His skin shimmered with a faint internal golden light, his eyes blazing with molten fire. His movements were incredibly swift, powerful, his ancient sword a deadly extension of his will. His opponent, a man with a lean, wiry build and eyes cold as chipped ice, moved with a serpentine grace, wielding a pair of wickedly curved daggers. His face was a mask of cold fury, etched with resentment. This was Olien, a dragon shifter of the Vare lineage, but one twisted by bitterness. "You cling to your pathetic human form, Theros," Olien snarled, his daggers flashing, barely parrying a powerful blow from Theros' sword. "While your father dallied with human fools, you chose exile, and now you shelter this abomination, this wingless one, whose blood will usher in the very chaos the council sought to avoid." "Her blood is not chaos, Olien," Theros roared, his voice deepening, a raw, draconic edge to it. "It is awakening, a balance if given the chance." His sword sang through the air, forcing Olien back against the wall of the chamber. "Balance? You speak of balance when the first seal is shattered?" Olien laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The Stormwing clan already senses her power. They will tear her from you, Theros, and use her to reforge the Serpent Lords. To claim dominion over all, I merely seek to offer her a swifter end." He lunged forward, not at Theros, but with a sudden, horrifyingly deliberate lunge towards the narrow passage where Reyna stood, half hidden. His daggers were aimed directly at her chest. "Reyna!" Theros bellowed, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury that shook the cavern. Time seemed to slow. Reyna saw the glint of steel, the malicious intent in Olien's eyes. A cold terror seized her, yet beneath it, the fire in her blood roared to life, a frantic, desperate surge of raw energy. It was no longer a gentle thrum, it was a burning, molten wave, demanding to be unleashed. She instinctively threw up her hands, not in defense, but in a primal, unthinking release of the power that surged through her. A blinding flash of golden light erupted from her palms, a wave of pure, scorching energy that slammed into Olien. The traitor cried out, not in pain, but in stunned disbelief. His body slammed backward as if struck by an invisible, colossal force. He hit the stone wall with a sickening crunch, his daggers flying from his hands, clattering uselessly to the floor. Reyna stared at her hands, still glowing faintly, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating wonder. She had done that. Her blood, her fire, had erupted, protecting her. Theros, his expression a mixture of profound shock and fierce pride, rushed to Olien, disarming him completely. The traitor lay gasping, staring at Reyna with wide, incredulous eyes, pain and dawning fear etched on his face. You unleashed the pure flame," Olien choked out, his voice weak. "The ancient power, the serpent's fire, it obeys her." Theros ignored him, his molten gaze fixed on Reyna. He knelt before her, his large hands gently taking hers. The warmth that had erupted from her palms was still present, a tingling, vibrant sensation. His touch was a grounding force, a comforting heat against the fading residual power. "You commanded the flame," Theros murmured, his voice filled with awe, yet also a subtle underlying tremor of apprehension. "You truly are the wingless one. You wield the power of the serpent blood." Reyna looked into his golden eyes, her own filled with a bewildering mix of emotions. I didn't know I could do that," she whispered, still trembling. "It just happened. I felt the danger, and it just burst forth." Vareth, who had finally caught up, gasped, his hand pressed to his mouth. "By the ancients, she has control. Even the rawest serpent lords rarely exhibited such instantaneous, precise command without years of training. This is unprecedented." Theros rose, pulling Reyna gently to her feet. He kept her hand in his, a silent anchor. He turned to Olyan, his expression now cold, unforgiving. "Who sent you, Olyan? How did you breach the wards?" Olyan, still groaning, managed a bitter laugh. "The Stormwing clan. They promised me glory, Theros. They despise your exile, your father's memory. They knew of your refuge here, from an old network of informants, from texts his father kept, ones they managed to acquire after his downfall. They promised me power, to be lord of these mountains, once you were dealt with. And the girl delivered to their chieftain." He spat on the ground. "But her power, it's a madness. She will burn you all." Theros' face darkened, his grip on Reyna's hand tightening almost imperceptibly. "The Stormwing, of course." He looked at Reyna, then back at Olyan. "You were a fool, Olyan, and now you have endangered us all. Your betrayal has not only brought hunters to our doorstep, but has now alerted the Stormwing to Reyna's true nature. They will not rest until they have her, or until her blood unleashes the chaos they seek to control." Suddenly, a dull roar echoed from the deeper tunnels, a sound of immense, unfettered power. It was not Theros' controlled transformation, but a wild, primal, resonant bellow that sent shivers down Reyna's spine. It felt ancient, hungry, malevolent. "What was that?" Reyna whispered, her blood instantly cold. Olyan, despite his pain, managed a triumphant, albeit chilling, grin. "The deeper pathways, Theros. While you were busy playing protector, I sought to destabilize the mountain's core. I awakened something else, something far older than your precious human girl, the true guardians of the deeper seals, the ancient primal energy itself." Theros' golden eyes widened, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his formidable features. "The dragon's heart," he breathed, his voice laced with grim realization. "You fool, that power is unstable, untamable. It will consume the mountain." The cavern began to shake violently. Cracks, thin and glowing red, snaked across the stone walls, spiderwebbing outwards from the deeper passages. The vibrant crystals began to pulse erratically, their light flaring and dimming as if struggling against an overwhelming surge of energy. "We must leave, Theros," Vareth cried, his voice shrill with terror. "The mountain is becoming unstable. The deeper seals are tearing apart." Theros grabbed Reyna, pulling her close, shielding her with his body. The heat emanating from him was intense now, not just his internal flame, but a desperate, protective warmth. He looked at the glowing cracks, at the shuddering stone, then down at Reyna. His golden eyes, filled with a grim determination, met hers. "We cannot leave," Theros said, his voice hard, resolute. "The dragon's heart, it is tied to the mountain's very core. If it fully awakens, it will unleash a cataclysm that will shatter not just this mountain, but the entire realm. It must be contained. And the only way to do that is to rebind the seals." He looked at Reyna, a profound, almost desperate plea in his gaze. "Your blood, Reyna. It shattered the first seal. Perhaps it can also mend them, but the cost." His words trailed off as another earth-shattering roar ripped through the mountain, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. The glowing cracks widened, spewing molten rock and searing steam. The cavern began to crumble, rocks raining down from the ceiling. Theros pulled Reyna even closer, pressing her against his powerful frame, as if to absorb the impact of the collapsing world around them. "Hold on, wingless one," he commanded, his voice raw with urgency. "Our destiny, it truly begins now." As the mountain groaned and threatened to collapse around them, Reyna felt the primal roar of the dragon's heart reverberating through her very soul. It was a terrifying, seductive call, echoing the wildfire in her own veins. The cost, the price of awakening. It was not just for her, but for the Dragon Lord who had sworn to protect her, for the entire realm. The choice was upon them, amidst the collapsing stone and the awakening chaos, a choice that would either bind their worlds or consume them in a blaze of ancient fire. The prophecy, once a whispered legend, was now a roaring inferno, demanding its due. The mountain shuddered, a living, groaning beast racked with agony. Rocks rained down from the ceiling, kicking up choking clouds of dust and stone. The air grew thick with sulfur and ozone, searing Reyna's lungs with every desperate gasp. Theros shielded her, his powerful body a bulwark against the collapsing world, his arms a cage of protective steel around her. She could feel the immense power radiating from him, a protective inferno against the chaos. "The dragon's heart is tearing itself free," Vareth shrieked, his voice thin with terror, clinging to a jutting rock as the ground bucked beneath them. "The primordial essence, it hungers for release." The glowing cracks in the stone walls widened, spewing not just molten rock, but tendrils of what looked like solidified shadow, writhing with an unnatural dark energy. They pulsed, reaching out like hungry claws, and Reyna felt a horrifying echo within her own blood, a resonance with the raw, untamed power Olian had unleashed. It was tempting, seductive, promising absolute power if only she would surrender. "We must reach the core," Theros roared, his voice barely audible above the din of the collapsing mountain. He shifted, pulling Reyna even closer, then burst into motion, his steps impossibly swift, dodging falling debris with practiced ease. "The binding wards will be weakened. We have a chance to reseal it." He didn't hesitate, plunging deeper into the very heart of the crumbling mountain, towards the source of the immense, resonant roar that now filled their ears. Reyna, pressed against him, felt the rhythm of his powerful heart, a steady, unyielding beat against the frantic hammering of her own. Her internal fire, once a source of terror, now flared with a defiant will, pushing back against the encroaching chaos, aligning itself with Theros' protective strength. The passages grew narrower, hotter, the air shimmering with intense heat. The crystal veins embedded in the walls pulsed with blinding, erratic light, struggling against the suffocating darkness of the unleashed energy. They passed Olian, who lay groaning, half buried under rubble, his earlier malice replaced by pure, agonizing fear. Theros spared him only a fleeting, contemptuous glance, his focus solely on the impending cataclysm. Finally, they burst into a colossal cavern, a vast echoing chamber that dwarfed all others. This was the dragon's heart. In the center of the cavern, a maelstrom of raw energy churned. It was a vortex of molten gold and churning shadow, pulsating with a terrifying primal power. Jagged pillars of black rock, covered in glowing runes, encircled the maelstrom, remnants of ancient binding wards, now fractured and sparking with chaotic energy. The air vibrated with a deafening hum, the very sound of creation and destruction interwoven. From the swirling chaos, monstrous, formless shapes began to coalesce, spectral, ethereal creatures of pure shadow and molten light, the raw spirits of the serpent lords, trapped for eons, now stirring, hungering for release. Their silent roars were more terrifying than any sound, a psychic scream that echoed directly in Reyna's mind, promising untold power, endless destruction. Theros stopped at the edge of the maelstrom, his hand still firmly clasped around Reyna's, his body tense, radiating immense power. His golden eyes blazed with fierce determination, yet Reyna saw a flicker of doubt, a hint of desperation, in their depths. "The core is too unstable," Theros growled, his voice strained against the roar of the dragon's heart. "The wards, they are barely holding. We need to channel the power, to bind it anew. But how?" Vareth, clutching his tome, stumbled to their side, his face aghast. "The winged heart prophecy, Lord Theros," he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Reyna. "It speaks of the blood, of the wingless one channeling the primal flame, using the bond to forge a new seal, not to contain, but to integrate, to balance chaos with heart." Theros looked at Reyna, his gaze piercing, filled with a terrible understanding. "To integrate, not contain," he murmured, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. "To become the conduit, to merge your awakened blood with the dragon's heart, to become the living seal. Reyna felt a chill, then a burning heat. To become the living seal, to merge with the source of the Serpent Lord's power. It meant surrendering herself entirely, embracing the wildness within, risking the very humanity Verith had warned her about. But the alternative? The utter destruction of everything she knew, of every living creature in the realm. What is the cost? Reyna asked, her voice trembling but firm. She had to know. Theros's gaze was grave. To fully merge with the dragon's heart, it would mean a profound transformation. Your blood, already imbued with the Serpent Lord's essence, would ignite with a primal fire beyond imagining. Your heart, it would beat with the rhythm of the mountain itself. You would become a creature of immense power, Reyna, a living embodiment of the awakened blood. He paused, then looked at Verith. And for the Dragon Lord who carries the soul flame bond, the prophecy speaks of a shared burden, a draining of his own fire, a deep, resonant connection that would bind their very souls. It could weaken me, perhaps permanently, or transform me in ways I cannot foresee. The bond would be absolute, unbreakable. Reyna looked at the churning maelstrom, at the spectral forms reaching out, hungering. She looked at Theros, his face grim, yet resolute, his molten eyes holding hers with a depth of unspoken emotion. She saw the burden of his exile, the pain of his past, the fierce protectiveness he held for her. And in that moment, the choice became clear. It wasn't about fear or power, but about destiny, about protecting this world and protecting him. I will do it, Reyna said, her voice clear and strong, resonating even above the roar of the dragon's heart. I will become the living seal, but only if you are with me, Theros. Only if we face this, together, as the prophecy foretells. Theros's golden eyes flared with a fierce, almost desperate hope. He nodded, a single, decisive movement. Then we forged the seal, wingless one, together. He released her hand, then reached out, drawing her closer, his gaze locked on hers. His hands, large and powerful, cupped her face. The heat emanating from him intensified, swirling around them, a protective shield against the encroaching chaos. The bond must be absolute, Theros murmured, his voice raw, laced with an intensity that made Reyna's breath catch. A melding of spirit and flame, a soul flame unbound. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or shy. It was a kiss of primal fire, of ancient power, of desperate hope and profound destiny. His lips, warm and firm, met hers, igniting a blaze that surged through Reyna's entire being. The world exploded around them, not in destruction, but in a kaleidoscope of searing light and overwhelming sensation. The kiss deepened, pulling her into a vortex of pure, elemental energy. She felt Theros's very essence merging with hers. His power, his pain, his ancient wisdom, his fierce protectiveness. And he, in turn, seemed to draw her in, absorbing her fear, her courage, the wild fire of her serpent blood. The fire within Reyna's veins roared, no longer a terrifying beast, but a conduit of immense controlled power. Golden light erupted from her, mirroring the molten core of the dragon's heart. The spectral forms of the Serpent Lords recoiled, shrieking in silent agony as the pure, integrated power of the soul flame bound them. Theros's skin began to glow, his human form shimmering, expanding, contracting. His bones shifted, his muscles rippled beneath his skin. Reyna felt the dizzying sensation of his transformation, not into a beast of rage, but into something grander, more ancient, a true lord of dragons, integrated with the power of the soul flame. His form began to stabilize. His eyes, still molten gold, now held a new depth, a profound connection to her. She felt the very fabric of reality shift. The roaring maelstrom of the dragon's heart began to slow, to coalesce, no longer chaotic, but pulsing with a regulated, integrated rhythm. The glowing cracks in the mountain walls sealed themselves, not with crude force, but with intricate, shimmering patterns of light, ancient runes woven anew by the power flowing through her. The spectral serpent lords, once a threat, now dissipated, absorbed into the newly forged energy, their raw power tempered, brought into balance. Reyna felt a profound sense of connection to the mountain, to the earth, to the very elements themselves. She was the mountain, she was the flame, she was the beating heart of a new, integrated power. But the transformation came with its cost. A searing pain lanced through her, not of destruction, but of profound change. Her senses sharpened, overwhelming her with a cacophony of tastes, smells, sounds. Her emotions, once purely human, now surged with a primal intensity, a wild, untamed river of feeling. She felt a connection to every living thing, a profound empathy that threatened to shatter her. She closed her eyes, fighting the overwhelming sensory input, fighting to retain her core, herself. When she opened her eyes again, the cavern was still, bathed in a soft golden light. The maelstrom was gone, replaced by a smooth, pulsating orb of pure, integrated energy, humming gently in the center of the chamber. The air was clean, warm, filled with the scent of pine and rich earth. Theros stood before her, no longer fully human, nor fully dragon. His form was subtly altered, his eyes burning with an even fiercer, more ancient golden fire. His skin held a faint, shimmering, iridescent quality, as if scales lay just beneath the surface. His shoulders were broader, his presence even more immense, but his hand was still clasped in hers, his touch a tether, a comforting warmth amidst the storm within her. Vareth, who had cowered behind a rock during the transformation, now emerged, his jaw agape, his spectacles askew. By the ancients, the prophecy fulfilled, the winged heart, the integrated seal. It has worked. Reyna looked at Theros and saw not just her protector, but her other half. The profound change had woven them together, their souls entwined, their powers balanced. The serpent blood in her veins no longer felt like a curse, but a profound gift, tempered by his presence, by their shared bond. But the overwhelming senses, the surging emotions, were still a challenge. A primal hunger stirred within her, a desire to soar, to unleash the fire that now resided not just in her blood, but in her very soul. She looked at Theros, and in his eyes, she saw not only deep love and connection, but a shared burden, a new daunting path stretching before them. The transformation was complete, but the journey of understanding, of mastering this new, integrated power, had only just begun. The mountains still held secrets, the realm still faced threats, and the new Flame Queen and her Dragon Lord would have to navigate a world that was forever changed. The silence that followed the rebinding of the dragon's heart was not empty, but resonant, humming with the vibrant, integrated energy that now permeated the mountain. Reyna felt it deep within her, a profound connection to the stone, the earth, the very air she breathed. Her senses, still acutely heightened, absorbed every detail. The faint metallic tang of the mountain's minerals, the distant drip of water, the subtle shift in air currents as Vareth approached. Theros still held her hand, his touch a grounding force amidst the overwhelming sensations. His golden eyes, now shimmering with an iridescent depth, never left hers. He was transformed, subtly, profoundly. The lines of his face seemed sharper, more ancient, yet also softened by the shared ordeal, by the absolute bond forged between them. Unbelievable, Vareth breathed, his voice hushed, tinged with awe. He gazed at the pulsating orb of integrated energy, then at Reyna and Theros, as if witnessing a miracle. The winged heart. The prophecy is truly fulfilled. Not merely a sealing, but an integration, a new balance of the primordial flame. Reyna felt a surge of warmth and light within her, not just from the residual power, but from a profound sense of purpose. She had embraced the wildness, merged with the chaos, and emerged different, stronger. Yet the cost was undeniable. Her human emotions, once a gentle stream, now felt like a raging river, overwhelming her with their intensity. Every joy was ecstatic, every sorrow a crushing weight, every flicker of anger a searing inferno. The cost. It is real, Reyna whispered, her voice husky, heavy with the weight of her transformation. She looked at Theros, a silent plea in her eyes. My emotions, they feel too raw, too much. I feel everything. Theros squeezed her hand, his gaze filled with understanding. It is the awakening, wingless one. The serpent lords were beings of pure, amplified emotion. Your heart, now intertwined with that power, experiences the world with an intensity beyond human comprehension. This is the struggle, to retain your humanity while wielding such power. He turned to Vareth. Olian, he still lives? Vareth, startled from his reverie, nodded. Barely, my lord. He is gravely injured, trapped beneath some rubble. But his treachery, it is undeniable. He must face judgment. Theros's face hardened. He will, but not by my hand yet. The immediate threat is from the Stormwing. Olian's words confirm their intent. They will know of this awakening, if not through his immediate return, then through the echoes of the mountain's stabilization. They will come for you, Reyna, for the power you now embody. But the mountain is sealed, Reyna countered, a flicker of hope amidst the emotional maelstrom. The dragon's heart is bound. Bound, yes, Theros acknowledged, his gaze sweeping the now calm cavern. But its power can still be sensed, especially by those attuned to draconic energies. The Stormwing are relentless, aggressive. They seek dominion, and your blood, now awakened and integrated, represents the ultimate prize. They will not rest until they possess it. He looked at her, his golden eyes burning with fierce resolve. We must prepare, not just for defense, but for confrontation. Your power, Reyna, must be refined, controlled, before it consumes you or before the Stormwing exploit it. A profound exhaustion washed over Reyna, a weariness that went beyond the physical, the sheer weight of responsibility, of the realm's fate resting on her newly awakened shoulders, was daunting. How, she asked, her voice faltering. How do I control this? This fire, this feeling? Theros guided her gently towards a smooth, unblemished section of the cavern wall, which now seemed to hum with a subtle, protective energy. Through understanding, through stillness, and through the bond we now share. He placed his free hand over her heart, his touch warm, reassuring. The soul flame flows between us, Reyna. It is not just power, but a connection, a guide. I can feel your raw emotions, your burgeoning strength, and you, in turn, can draw strength and calm from me. He closed his eyes, and a deep, resonant hum emanated from him, vibrating through Reyna's very core. She felt a soothing warmth spread through her, a gentle tempering of the chaotic emotions. Her racing heart slowed. Her frantic thoughts began to quiet. It was like a calm in the eye of an emotional storm. Feel that? Theros murmured, his eyes still closed, his voice low and steady. That is the bond, a shared rhythm. When your emotions threaten to overwhelm, focus on my presence. Draw from my steadiness, just as I will draw from your vibrant spirit. Reyna focused, breathing deeply, letting his calm seep into her. The fire within her didn't diminish, but became more contained, less volatile. She felt a profound gratitude, a fierce affection for this dragon lord who had not only saved her, but was now guiding her through the terrifying landscape of her own awakened soul. The primal bond between them, once a source of terrifying wonder, now felt like an unbreakable anchor. Over the next few days, Theros and Vareth devoted themselves to Reyna's training. The cavern became her sanctuary and her school. Theros, patient yet firm, guided her through meditations, teaching her to quiet the storm of her emotions, to focus the surging power of her blood. The Serpent Lords were consumed by their power, Theros explained one afternoon, as Reyna struggled to maintain a focused stream of flame from her palm, her emotions flaring. They did not understand the need for discipline. The key is not to suppress, but to control, to harness the primal fire without letting it burn away your essence. He would stand with her, his presence a constant, steadying force. When her emotions threatened to overwhelm, he would place his hand over her heart, or simply meet her gaze, and the calming current of their soul flame bond would flow between them, centering her. Vareth, meanwhile, delved deeper into the ancient texts, deciphering fragments of the winged heart prophecy, searching for clues on how to master the integrated power. He discovered more disturbing revelations. The prophecy spoke not only of the wingless one's choice, but of a dire consequence if the balance was not maintained. The blood of the Serpent Lord, untamed, shall summon a void, Vareth read one morning, his voice trembling as he traced the ancient script. A shadow that hungers for all light, tearing the fabric of reality itself. The revelation sent a chill down Reyna's spine. The stakes were even higher than she'd imagined. Not just her own humanity, but the very existence of the realm depended on her ability to control this raw, elemental force. Her powers grew. She learned to summon tendrils of flame, not just as a defensive burst, but with precision and intent. She discovered a latent connection to the earth itself, feeling the subtle tremors, the flow of underground water, the pulse of distant mountains. It was as if the world sang to her, and she could finally understand its ancient language. Yet, with every surge of power, her emotions remained dangerously amplified. A moment of frustration could ignite a small, uncontrolled burst of flame. A wave of joy could send shimmering heat radiating from her skin. The struggle to integrate her human heart with the primal fire was a constant, exhausting battle. One evening, as Reyna practiced channeling her flame, a flicker of red and orange, a sharp metallic tang filled the cavern. The crystal veins pulsed erratically. Theros, who had been observing in silent contemplation, stiffened. "They're here," he growled, his golden eyes narrowing, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his sword. "The Stormwing, and the Iron Scale Order with them. Their forces are combined." Reyna felt a jolt of fear, but beneath it, a surge of adrenaline, a readiness she hadn't known she possessed. The fire in her blood, honed by days of practice, pulsed with a fierce, controlled heat. She was ready. "How could they find us so quickly?" Vareth whispered, his face pale. "Olian?" Theros stated grimly. "They must have followed his trail, or captured him and extracted the location. His betrayal runs deeper than I thought." He turned to Reyna, his gaze intense, assessing. "Your training has been swift, Wingless One. But the true test begins now. These are not mere hunters. The Stormwing are cunning, ruthless. They will seek to exploit your power, or to break you." He moved to his full height, his posture radiating immense, dangerous power. His form began to subtly shift, his shoulders broadening, his muscles rippling. The air around him shimmered with the familiar, intense heat of his imminent transformation. "We will face them together," Theros declared, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through Reyna's bones, reinforcing the unbreakable bond between them, as the prophecy foretold. "But the true battle will not be with their blades, Reyna. It will be within you, to control the power, to master the flame, to choose the path of balance, even amidst the fire and blood of war." A deafening crack echoed from the entrance of the stronghold, followed by the sound of splintering stone. The outermost wards had fallen. The invasion had begun. Reyna looked at Theros, then at her hands, which now pulsed with a steady golden light. Her emotions were a tempest, but anchored by his presence, by their bond, she felt a profound certainty. The price of awakening had been paid. Now she would face its ultimate test. The realm, her humanity, and the Dragon Lord she was bound to, all hung in the balance as the Stormwing and the Iron Scale Order breached their sanctuary, bringing the war directly to the heart of the mountain. The thunderous crack of splintering stone reverberated through the stronghold, signaling the breach. The outermost wards, ancient and formidable, had succumbed to the relentless assault. Dust and fine debris rained down from the ceiling as the mountain groaned under the impact. Reyna felt a surge of raw adrenaline, her heart pounding a primal rhythm that mirrored the deep, resonant thrum of the dragon's heart now bound within the mountain. Theros, already halfway through his transformation, stood as a towering presence beside her. His human form stretched and expanded, muscles rippling under his skin, his golden eyes blazing with an intense, molten fire. The air around him shimmered with the immense heat of his power, a protective aura that seemed to push back against the encroaching darkness. "Stay close," Theros commanded, his voice a low growl, imbued with a deep, draconic resonance. He drew his greatsword, its blade catching the erratic light of the pulsing crystals, casting shifting patterns across the cavern walls. "Vareth, secure the inner passage. If they reach this far, the core must not be disturbed." Vareth, his face pale but resolute, nodded, clutching his tome. "As you command, Lord Theros." He scurried towards a concealed alcove, activating subtle wards that shimmered into existence, reinforcing the natural defenses. Heavy footsteps echoed from the main tunnel, accompanied by the clang of armor and the sharp, venomous voices of the Stormwing. Then the guttural snarls of their draconic allies, lesser dragons of the Stormwing clan, eager for battle. The Iron Scale Order, their leader Corvin now seemingly recovered from his earlier defeat, also advanced, their cold, determined faces visible as they poured into the stronghold. Leading the charge was a figure of formidable presence, Lord Caduce, chieftain of the Stormwing clan. He was a dragon lord of immense size and power, even in human form, his black scales visible beneath his scarred skin, his eyes a chilling, stormy gray, utterly devoid of warmth. He wore heavy ceremonial armor adorned with stylized thunderbolts and jagged mountain peaks, a cloak of woven black dragon hide flowing behind him. By his side, Corvin, the hunter leader, his face a mask of fanatical zeal, his greatsword gleaming ominously. Caidus's gaze swept the cavern, then locked onto Reyna, his stormy eyes widening slightly as he registered the profound change in her, the golden glow that now emanated subtly from her skin. "The wingless one," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "The rumors were true, her blood has awakened. And Theros Vare, you dare to defy the council's decree by harboring this abomination?" "She is no abomination, Caidus," Theros retorted, his voice vibrating with controlled fury. "She is the key to balance, and she is under my protection." "Protection?" Caidus scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. "Or a prisoner to your twisted ideals? Your father believed in blending bloodlines, Theros, and it cost him his life. This girl carries the serpent's curse, not a gift. She will bring chaos, and we, the Stormwing, will harness it. We will reforge the Dragon War, and this time, we will be victorious." He raised his hand, and at his command, dozens of Stormwing warriors, both human and draconic, poured into the cavern, their eyes fixed on Reyna. The iron-scale hunters, their blades drawn, fanned out, their cold, calculating gazes assessing the formidable Theros, but always returning to the glowing human girl. "Surrender her, Theros," Caidus commanded, his voice rising, "and perhaps your exile will be lifted. Resist, and you will join your father in ignominy and death." Reyna felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage at his words, at the condescension, at the blatant disrespect for Theros and his father. Her blood boiled, and the golden flame within her flared, radiating a sudden, intense heat that made the nearest Stormwing warriors recoil. It was a terrifying, exhilarating sensation, the raw power of the Serpent Lords, amplified by her transformed emotions. Theros sensed her rising power, the dangerous edge of her amplified fury. He squeezed her hand, a silent command for control, a steadying presence through their bond. "Hold, Reyna," he murmured, his voice low. "Let your power be a shield, not a weapon of indiscriminate fire. Not yet." Reyna focused on his touch, on the steady flow of his calm through their bond. The searing rage tempered, channeled into a controlled, simmering intensity. Her flame still burned, but it was no longer a wildfire, but a focused, formidable heat. "She has chosen her path, Caidus," Theros announced, his voice ringing with authority. "And I have chosen mine. You will not have her." With a roar, Theros shifted fully. The cavern was filled with the blinding flash of his transformation. In a moment, the Dragon Lord stood revealed in his full glory. A colossal dragon of twilight obsidian scales, vast leathery wings unfurled to their immense span, his head crowned with sharp, jutting horns. His molten gold eyes, now ablaze with primal fury, fixed on Caidus. He was a creature of awe-inspiring power, a living mountain of muscle and fire. The Stormwing warriors faltered, even Caidus momentarily taken aback by Theros' raw power, but their fear was quickly replaced by a furious determination. Caidus, roaring defiance, shifted into his own draconic form, a majestic dragon of storm-gray scales, crackling with arcs of lightning. The cavern erupted into battle. Lesser Stormwing dragons swarmed Theros, trying to overwhelm him, their roars echoing deafeningly. Human warriors and iron-scale hunters surged forward, their blades clanging against the unyielding stone. Reyna, standing amidst the chaos, felt the battlefield through her heightened senses. The clash of steel, the guttural roars, the shifting air currents, the distant tremors of the mountain. Her blood pulsed with a desperate urge to join the fray, to unleash the power that now coursed through her veins. But Theros' words echoed in her mind. "Let your power be a shield, not a weapon of indiscriminate fire." She remembered her training, the focus on control, on channeling her emotions. A group of iron-scale hunters, led by Corvin, broke away from the main conflict, their objective clear: Reyna. Corvin's eyes, filled with fanatical zeal, gleamed as he lunged, his greatsword aimed directly at her. "The wingless one is ours," he shrieked. "For the cleansing," Reyna stood her ground. A surge of focused intent flowed through her, channeled by the bond with Theros. The golden flame in her hands intensified, no longer a random burst, but a coherent, powerful wave. She flung her hands forward, unleashing a blinding wall of pure, scorching energy. The flame hit Corvin and his hunters with immense force, not burning them to ash, but slamming them backward, throwing them against the cavern wall with sickening force. They collapsed, groaning, their armor smoking, their eyes wide with fear and shock. Her flame was precise, controlled, protective. Theros, battling Kaidos in a flurry of scales and fire, glanced back, a flicker of fierce approval in his molten eyes. He saw her control, her strength, and a fresh wave of protective fury fueled his own battle. Kaidos, however, was a formidable opponent. His lightning-wreathed scales crackled, his thunderous roars shaking the cavern. He was relentless, driven by ambition and a deep-seated hatred for Theros' lineage. He sought to exploit Reyna's power, to bind it to his will, or failing that, to destroy her. The battle raged, a maelstrom of dragonfire and human steel. Theros fought with primal fury, but also with a defensive posture, constantly aware of Reyna's position, subtly shifting to draw the main attacks away from her. He was protecting her, draining his own immense power in the process. Reyna could feel the strain on their bond, the subtle weakening of his immense strength. She knew she couldn't just stand there, a protected object. Her power was meant for more. A desperate, daring thought struck her. The mountain was now attuned to her, its energy integrated with her very being. Could she use that connection? Reyna closed her eyes, focusing inward, reaching out with her awakened senses. She felt the ancient pulse of the mountain, the deep veins of elemental energy, the subtle tremors, the shifting stone. She extended her will, channeling the fire within her, not to attack, but to defend. With a surge of power, the very cavern responded. Jagged stalagmites erupted from the floor, impaling Stormwing warriors. Sections of the ceiling crumbled, sending rocks crashing down on clusters of iron-scale hunters. Walls shimmered, creating blinding illusions of fire and shadow, disorienting their enemies. The mountain itself became her weapon, her shield. Kaidos roared in frustration, momentarily disoriented by the mountain's sudden, intelligent defense. "The wingless one controls the very stone," he bellowed. "She has become the mountain's heart." Theros, seizing the momentary advantage, slammed Kaidos with a powerful tail swipe, sending the Stormwing Lord crashing into a pillar of rock. Kaidos roared, shaking off the blow, but the tide of battle had begun to turn. The Stormwing and Ironscale forces were faltering, caught between Theros' relentless power and Reyna's unprecedented control over the mountain itself. But just as a glimmer of victory emerged, a chilling, piercing shriek ripped through the cavern. It was a sound of absolute despair, of ancient agony. Reyna's eyes snapped open. The source of the scream was Verith. The scholar lay crumpled near the inner passage, his protective wards shattered. Standing over him was Olian, miraculously free from the rubble, his face a mask of triumphant, insane glee. In his hand, a shard of glowing, dark crystal, pulsing with a malevolent, corrupted energy. He had plunged it into Verith's chest. "The prophecy! It must be silenced!" Olian shrieked, his voice laced with madness. "The winged heart will bring only ruin. I will save us all." Verith, his eyes wide with pain and shock, looked at Reyna, then at Theros. "The prophecy. It spoke of betrayal. Within the bonds," he choked out, his voice fading. He was trying to warn them, even in his last moments. Then his eyes glazed over, and he slumped, lifeless. Reyna felt a searing agony, a personal grief that threatened to shatter her newfound control. Verith, the kind scholar, the first to truly believe in her, was gone, murdered. Her emotions surged, an inferno of grief, rage, and despair that threatened to consume her. The golden flame in her hands flared wildly, dangerously, reflecting the raw, untamed power Olian had feared. "No!" Reyna shrieked, her voice echoing with the primal force of her awakened blood. The mountain pulsed in response, its very core resonating with her overwhelming grief. Theros, seeing Verith fall, seeing Reyna's power surge out of control, let out a guttural roar of pure, unadulterated fury. He turned from Kaidus, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity, fixed on Olyan. All thoughts of strategy, of control, vanished. Only primal rage remained. "Olyan!" Theros' voice boomed, full of an ancient, terrible wrath. "You will pay for this treachery." He lunged, shifting fully to his draconic form, his massive claws extended, ready to tear the traitor apart. But Olyan merely laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound. "Too late, Dragon Lord. Your human has lost control. Her wild blood will consume her, and then... the realm!" With a final taunting grin, Olyan vanished into a shimmering portal of dark energy, a desperate escape, leaving Theros and Reyna to face the devastating consequences of his betrayal. Reyna's grief and rage ripped through her, threatening to engulf her sanity. The golden flame that had been her shield now pulsed erratically, dangerously. The mountain's defenses faltered, the light from the crystals dimming, overwhelmed by her uncontrolled emotions. The path of balance, the choice, hung precariously as the raw, untamed power of the Serpent Lords threatened to consume her, to turn her into the very chaos Olyan had prophesied. Theros, abandoning the fight against Kaidus, rushed towards her, his golden eyes filled with desperate concern, knowing that the real battle, the one for her soul, had only just begun. The world was a maelstrom of blinding light and scorching heat, a kaleidoscope of raw, untamed emotions. Vareth's lifeless form, Olyan's taunting grin, the overwhelming weight of grief and rage, all swirled within Reyna, amplified by the unbound power of the serpent's blood. The cavern pulsated around her, no longer a sanctuary, but a mirror of her internal chaos. The golden flame that now coursed through her veins threatened to consume her, tearing at the delicate threads of her humanity. Theros was there, a blurred obsidian form against the raging inferno of her power. She felt his presence through their bond, a desperate, aching plea, a powerful anchor fighting against the current of her despair. He was roaring, but his voice was distant, muffled by the psychic scream of her own inner turmoil. He was reaching for her, trying to break through the veil of her overwhelming emotions, but she was sinking, drowning in the boundless destructive energy. "Let it go," a seductive whisper slithered into her mind, a voice that was both ancient and her own. "Embrace the power, burn away the pain, become unbound." The urge was intoxicating, promising ultimate liberation from grief, from choice, from the burden of humanity, to simply be power, pure and untamed. Tendrils of shadow and molten light lashed out from her, uncontrolled, striking the cavern walls, causing further collapse. The mountain itself cried out in agony, struggling against the chaotic force it had reluctantly accepted. But then, amidst the seductive chaos, a single image cut through the fire. Theros' eyes, molten gold, filled with love and unwavering resolve. Not just a dragon lord, but her dragon lord, bound to her by a destiny deeper than blood, a soul flame that demanded balance, not destruction. She felt his pain, his fear for her, and a surge of his immense, steadying strength flowing through their bond. No, a defiant whisper rose from the depths of her soul, small at first, then growing stronger, fueled by his unwavering presence. "I will not be consumed. I choose." She fought, not against the power, but for control over it. She clutched at the fragments of her humanity. Vareth's trusting gaze, the memory of Gorik's brief tenderness, the simple warmth of her village life before it shattered. Most of all, she clung to Theros, to the feeling of his hand in hers, the searing heat of his kiss, the absolute certainty of their bond. The raw, primal scream within her began to temper, transforming into a focused, searing roar. The golden light emanating from her intensified. But now it was steady, controlled, pushing back against the encroaching shadow. She opened her eyes, meeting Theros' gaze. In his eyes, she saw not just love, but a reflection of her own burgeoning strength, her choice. Their bond surged, a wave of pure, integrated power that slammed into the chaotic maelstrom around her. It was emerging, a complete intertwining of their very essences. Theros' draconic form shifted, not shrinking, but hardening, becoming a vessel of immense stable power. His eyes blazed, twin suns of molten gold, and she felt his mind, his ancient wisdom, his profound calm, flow into her, weaving with her raw, amplified emotions. The uncontrolled flame around her coalesced, drawing inward, no longer destructive, but contained within her, pulsing with a steady, formidable light. The mountain, once racked with agony, now hummed a deep, content rhythm. The Stormwing, who had been scrambling to escape the earlier chaos, now recoiled, their faces pale, their resolve utterly shattered by the sheer, integrated power emanating from Reyna. Kaidos, the Stormwing chieftain, still in his draconic form, roared in defiance, but there was a tremor in his voice, a hint of true fear in his stormy eyes. Impossible, the wingless one! She controls the serpent's heart. She has become the Flame Queen. He lunged, a desperate, final attempt to shatter her newfound control. But Theros was faster. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the cavern, he met Kaidos, not with brute force alone, but with a surge of integrated power, a combination of elemental fire and controlled earth-shattering might. The clash was deafening, a shockwave of energy that threw the remaining Stormwing and Ironscale hunters backwards. Kaidos, his storm-gray scales scarred and cracked, was slammed to the ground, defeated. Theros stood over him, his obsidian form towering, his golden eyes burning with unyielding power. The war for the serpent's blood ends here, Kaidos. Theros rumbled, his voice imbued with the authority of the Rebound Mountain. The balance has been struck, and you will not disturb it again. Seeing their chieftain defeated, the remaining Stormwing and Ironscale forces fled, scrambling out of the stronghold, their cries of fear echoing in the newly stabilized tunnels. The invasion was over. Theros turned, his massive form shimmering, already shifting back to his subtly transformed human shape. He moved towards Reyna, his gaze never leaving hers. The bond between them hummed, vibrant and unbreakable. Reyna felt the transformation settle within her. Her senses were still heightened, her emotions still profound, but they were no longer chaotic. They were hers, controlled, integrated. The wild fire of the serpent's blood was no longer a curse, but a part of her, a powerful, radiant core that beat in harmony with her human heart. She was still Reyna Corvin, but she was also something more, the Flame Queen, the living embodiment of the Winged Heart prophecy. Theros reached her, his hand gently cupping her face. His thumb traced the faint, iridescent glow that now shimmered subtly beneath her skin, a mark of her transformation. "You chose, Wingless One," he murmured, his voice filled with a profound depth of emotion. "You chose balance. You embraced the power and retained your heart." Reyna leaned into his touch, her eyes meeting his. "We chose, Theros, together, through our bond." He nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Indeed, the soul flame burns true." He looked around the now silent cavern, at the gently pulsing orb of integrated energy that was the Rebound Dragon's heart. "The mountain has found its peace. And so, it seems, have we." They stood together, two beings profoundly changed, bound by a power older than memory, their destinies irrevocably entwined. The war was not truly over, not yet. The Stormwing would regroup, Kaidos would surely seek vengeance, and Oyen, the treacherous scholar, would likely return with darker schemes. But now they would face it together. The Flame Queen and her Dragon Lord, guardians of the newly forged balance, ready to stand against any who sought to unleash the chaos anew. Years later, the mountain stronghold was no longer a solitary refuge, but a beacon of hope and a center of learning. Reyna Corvin, the Flame Queen, sat at the great stone table, now adorned with intricate carvings and vibrant tapestries. Her skin still held a subtle iridescent glow, and her eyes, though human, possessed an ancient wisdom, reflecting the integrated power within her. Her emotions, once a raging river, were now a vast, calm ocean, deep and powerful, yet utterly controlled. She wore robes of deep crimson and gold, colors of both fire and earth, a crown of intricately forged obsidian resting lightly on her brow. Beside her, Theros Veyer, his human form now imbued with a permanent, subtle draconic grace, his molten gold eyes holding a depth of centuries and an unwavering love, oversaw the mapping of trade routes and the forging of new alliances. The Veyer clan, seeing the undeniable proof of balance and power, had returned to him, acknowledging him as their true lord. Their clan, once exiled, was now a powerful force for peace, under the guidance of the Flame Queen. Their bond, the soul flame, hummed constantly between them, a silent symphony that guided their every decision. It was a source of immense strength, a wellspring of shared understanding that transcended words. They had nurtured it, understood its nuances, and through it had found a profound, symbiotic balance. The realm had slowly begun to heal from the fractured legacies of the Dragon War. Reyna and Theros had traveled widely, speaking to human settlements and dragon clans alike, demonstrating the truth of the integrated power. They showed that humanity and draconic blood could coexist, not in fear, but in strength, in balance. Reyna, through her unique connection to the earth, had even found a way to subtly reawaken barren lands, bringing life and prosperity to regions ravaged by ancient conflicts. The Stormwing clan, under a new, less ambitious chieftain, had retreated, their power diminished, their aggression quelled by the unyielding force of the Flame Queen and her Dragon Lord. Corvin and the Ironscale Order had disbanded, their fanaticism unable to withstand the undeniable proof of a balanced power. Olien, the traitor, had been pursued for years. Eventually, he was found, broken and insane, consumed by the corrupted power of the dark crystal he had wielded, a chilling testament to the dangers of untamed magic. His fate served as a stark warning, a reminder of the insidious nature of chaos. Children, human and dragonkin, now played freely in the valleys beneath the mountain, their laughter echoing through the ancient forests. The shadow of the old dragon war had receded, replaced by the dawn of a new age, an age of peace, of understanding, and of balance. Reyna, the wingless one, who had once been cursed and rejected, now ruled as the revered Flame Queen, her human heart beating in harmony with the ancient integrated power of the serpent's blood. And by her side, Theros, her dragon lord, her protector, her soul flame, stood as a beacon of strength and wisdom. Their journey had been one of fire and blood, of betrayal and destiny. But through it all, they had found each other, forged an unbreakable bond, and ultimately saved a realm. The blood she carried had never been meant to stay asleep. It was meant to awaken, to integrate, to ignite a new path. And together, the Flame Queen and her Dragon Lord had finally illuminated it,